Welcome to the 2014 Year in Review.
Dun, 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 dun.
What was that, Steve?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, like the news announcing thing, you know.
Oh,
It always sounds very official and very affirmative, very very rousing,
news.
a little bit patriotic, but you can't place where.
So I'm excited to be jumping into as a group, our Year in Review. It's one of my favorite podcasts of the year because we get to reflect on everything we've done. I, of course, am Matt.
I'm John.
And I'm Steve.
And we'll get right into our Year in Review. We've done a lot this year. We've made a lot of strides for the website, the podcast, and there have been a lot of strides in music this year. So I want to first talk about our infallibility, or fallibility in this case. As you know, we've explained what our rating system is and why we rate the way we rate. And we have articles on the site about it if you don't know, so go read them. But sometimes at the end of the year we do allow ourselves to change some ratings vocally, just because we realize that sometimes even we grow on something, like something less, realize something's better in the pantheon. There are a lot of reasons to adjust things.
In general, we give ourselves a good solid week, and it's a week of thoroughly listening to the album, but very often a week, it takes a lot more.
Yeah.
So in those inevitabilities, then we come around to the end of the year, and sometimes it's just, you feel that some number was just off.
And sometimes it's just in the spur of a moment, you might feel it's a little bit better than it was, or it's a little bit worse than it was. You might have been honing on to one topic a little bit too much when reviewing an album.
That's a very common mistake. You
Yeah.
know, you get in love with just one thing, and then you realize that, well, you don't really care that the other things fell behind. But in retrospect, it kind of matters.
Or something might be so detrimental that you're going, well, that brings the whole album down. But in hindsight, it might not be that bad.
So do we want to alternate these or just go down the list?
I'll start.
All right.
I've mentioned this frequently on the podcast before because I found that it sort of is it's a gaping hole when I'm trying to rate other things against this particular work. And that's inevitably what you're dealing with, because you're dealing with something that does come down to competition in the end. Granted, of course, it's art and it's for everyone, and you're supposed to take it at face value. But there is competition here. Some things you're going to listen more to others, and you have to really, really think, why is that? Why do some things attract you, why other things fail? And if your number somehow doesn't reflect that, then you must have a serious issue there. So we did an album called Singles by Future Islands back in episode 104. It was brought on by the
Living Statue
Galatea, and it was a very interesting album in terms of theme and arc and this whole concept behind staring back at a relationship that may not have ever existed in the first place. It was a very, very fascinating concept, and probably one of the strongest themes we've ever had. But that was what we were honing into, I think, for the majority of that podcast. We were looking at lyrics and theme and all that stuff, and I found myself forgetting about the music behind it. But the music was good, too. It kind of supported it, but only vaguely. Not enough to warrant my original rating of 4.8, but I take it down only a smidgen, because sometimes that one little aspect, being theme, can still promote something extremely high. And this particular case, I still think that's enough. That warrants it. That warrants to bring it to a 4.6.
Okay. Just
a 0.2 difference. But, you know, these are big gaps in our upper echelon.
Yeah, for me, my first one is actually also Singles by Future Islands. I rated it a 5, and I still think it's one of the best records we've listened to all year, but I realized that there are other things that did come after it that I would rank above it, and I didn't feel it should be on that highest step. So I'm only bringing it down a quarter of a step from a 5 to a 4.75, because it's an incredible record, but I feel like it just needed to come down a 0.25 step.
I think we were enamored by the poetry in it.
Yes.
And of course, since this is a music podcast, you gotta consider that fallibility.
But it's still an incredible album, and that's why it stays at 4.75 for me.
Fair enough.
Coincidentally, I did not change my rating on this one, though I was close to it. I still think my original 4.7 was solid, but I have the same sort of reasoning for lowering another album. Beastie Boys, Check Your Head. In hindsight, it doesn't stand as well to today's music as I really thought it would. And that was the main reason why I gave such a high rating. Was honestly, Beastie Boys, that album is solid. And back in the day, I still think it warrants that 4.75 I've given it. But right now, in this time, it still stands, but I got to drop it down to a 4.5. It is a solid album, but I don't think it's on the cusp of greatness that it used to be. Maybe in its first, rendition, the first time you hear it on the radio, yeah, it's going to be that good. But upon subsequent listens, and the fact that, I didn't know all of it, but I did know a heck of a lot of it, I think nostalgia might have colored my eyes a little bit too much listening to that guy. So yeah, that one's going down a little bit.
That's the problem with nostalgia albums. We often have that case because we usually give guests that freedom to take a nostalgia trip if they want to, but then it winds up conflicting with our year-end ratings because of the fact that we're rating something 20 years before other things were made, which is a bizarre, thing to deal with.
Well, that's why I left those out. I didn't adjust those because I feel like they're kind of in their own world and they'll exist where they exist.
I remember rating it lower at the time because of that exact fact John mentioned.
I did have another one that I lowered. It's also compared against what will ultimately come up a lot more later is the album that I felt was higher than this. But I was head over heels for St. Vincent by St. Vincent when we first reviewed it earlier this year. It was one of the first albums that Steve brought that really kind of knocked my socks off since Godsticks. But it's not a 5. I've listened to it a lot more since. I love it. She's brilliant, and it's great. But after hearing other artists of the same kind, it's not the best of what we've heard this year. Of that almost exact genre of pop-influenced composers. We've had several albums by people like that. So I brought it down from a 5 to a 4.75. Again, it's incredible. It's well done, but it's not perfect for me. It's not my end-all, be-all. But it's still up there.
That's actually a very minor change for me as well, although it reaches the same exact point, 4.75, from my 4.8, for reasons that maybe I'll get to later. Stay tuned.
Okay.
I'm on the exact opposite side with this one. St. Vincent, I just fell enamored with. It's sort of like a hindsight looking at Godsticks, which I also ended up bumping up to a 5. St. Vincent, I had 4.75. Honestly, I really find it to be perfect as is right now. Just a solid album. I'm changing it to a 5. I really love this album. Not quite my favorite of the year. That's coming up later. But it's such a solid piece of work that integrates so many different things into that kind of pop rock structure. And I'm finding stuff in it still. Especially when I was doing my re-listens. I'm finding these little things that I didn't hear before. And it's like, well, that's what I was kind of missing. So
I'll say this. I keep finding things in the same songs on that album. The same songs. But the rest of the album has some... It's too tipped. It's too tipped toward my favorites on that album. And that can't possibly constitute a 5. And a 5 is every track equal and must be taken as a whole, in my opinion, in my vision of what a 5 is. Right. So for that reason, that's why I think I'm keeping it 4.75. There are brilliant things on that album, but they're segmented. At a certain point, I'm gonna be playing the repeat, game.
Well, in a similar vein, for the same sort of reasons as St. Vincent, I'm also increasing My Brightest Diamond to a full 5.0. I can't do it otherwise. The two albums are so... Honestly, I kind of call them opposite sides of perfection at this point. One with just so innovative work with what My Brightest Diamond has done. The other one with taking what was already present and creating a brand new idea out of it. They're doing the almost exact opposite kind of ideas. Direction-wise, they both ended up being just perfect albums for me. Just from a level of understanding the music.
I am sticking My Brightest Diamond where it is at 4.8.
Mine is still staying at 5.
Fair enough.
I only have one increase this time around, and it's actually an unexpected one, but I've been listening to it a lot since we reviewed it, and I felt like Steve was right when he told me I was a little too harsh on it just because of what we expected. Ghost Stories by Coldplay. I only gave it a 3.5. And truth be told, it's Coldplay, and even though it was, very pop-focused and very different from a lot of their other stuff, it wasn't as intricate as some of the earlier stuff, the reality is I really like it, and there's still intricacies if you really look for them. So I'm boosting it only a mere 0.3 points, but it's going from a 3.5 to a 3.8. It's closer to a 4 than you think. It's just... if they had some elements of earlier Coldplay in this new record, it really could have achieved 4 or 4.5. And so I'm leaving it at 3.8 for me. And that's it for me for changes this year.
I have just one more. That last one would be an odd one. It takes us back to episode 85, I believe, and that would be Les Claypool's "Do It a Twang." You were right, Matt. It's just that's a cover album largely, and I remember giving that like slightly above a 4 just because he was doing two cool things with his covers. He was doing cool things with his own covers, and at the end of the day, I just, you know what? I would rather hear the original. Primus song exactly back where you originally rated it, which is 3.75.
And luckily, since I had no expectations with Les Claypool, I was able to keep it at my 4.25.
Fair enough. You live in your bliss.
Do you have any other changes?
I do have one last change, and this is one almost the same exact reasons as Beastie Boy. Madonna's True Blue. While I still think it was one of the greatest pop albums she's ever written, regardless of what any naysayer would say with her later stuff, compared to what's coming out nowadays, yeah, it has content, it has a lot going for it, but musically it does suffer. When you make the comparisons, it's going from a 4 to a 3.5. I mean, it's got a lot going for it, but it's just got it's so light in the areas that would have pushed it to that 4.
And considering this segment of the podcast is the last chance that we get to do this before the next year in review, 2015, I may still yet change something before the end of this episode. So stay tuned. Because obviously our selections, we segment this by categories. If anyone remembers our last year's year in review, we generally have general prizes that will encapsulate different aspects of music, sort of like the awards that you give to specific things, but very important things, considering what we're listening to. And then after that, we'll go to the booby prizes, which is obviously kind of speaks for itself. Things that weren't so good, but also things that maybe could have been better. You know, something to think about, just from an artist standpoint and from a listener standpoint. And then finally, our ultimate wins, which simply comprises best song, best album, and then some afterthoughts.
And then from there, we're going to do some wrap-up and talk about this website as a whole, the show as a whole, and all the people who helped made it possible this year. But let's get started with the first general prize, which is Catchiest Song. This is obviously in the title, just a song that you can't get out of your head, that's catchy to you, that really got you going this year. And mine came in kind of late this year. I know that the album review itself had some ups and downs, and this song especially you guys weren't terribly fond of, but for whatever reason, whenever it comes on my iPod, I can't help but dance, bob my head, and sing along. And that's OK Go's Turn Up the Radio. It's just a song I want to dance to. I want to do exactly that, turn up the radio and enjoy. There's not really a lot to say about it other than, it's just a song I really enjoy bobbing my head to.
Well, I dipped toward one of our favorites for this one because it was a standoutish single from an album that we just discussed, St. Vincent, and the crowning single, Digital Witness. It's irresistible. I said before I will repeat these songs over and over and over again. Well, this one is easily almost the leader of that pack for the catchy reason, because everything that she was doing in there basically just, it screams everything that I want 2010's pop to be. And it's irresistible. The video, you could take it or leave it. With it, it's awesome. Without it, it's still awesome. It comprises almost entirely of this rhythmic saxophone section, which I think dominates the track. And it's all about just the way those little minute changes within the rhythm and the bass that goes along with it. It's well, music to my ears would be redundant for the podcast, but yes. It's irresistible. Sums it up.
Mine was a split decision, though I did end up deciding one. I almost went with Da Vinci by Weezer from Everything Will Be Alright in the End. Because that's a love song that I can just get on board with. It's quick, it's dirty, you enjoy it, you can sing along with it on your first listen through. I did. But I'm also going to draw from St. Vincent. This is my catchiest song. St. Vincent's Birth in Reverse.
Interesting. That was another single. That was the first single, second track, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Every time she goes into the chorus and I can't keep up with her, I have to try to sing along with it. It's got the rising and falling of the notes that just make it flow so well. It's got punctuation in the rhythm that supports the lyrics and her vocals so well. And that slightly disturbing melody that she has throughout of it, the way she plays with the pitch of the notes is so, like, both jarring and catching at the same time. I have to go with this song. I love this song.
Interesting. See, that's a catchy album. I strongly promote it to anyone who just kind of wants to have a good time, because St. Vincent will give you that much. I guess I'll take us into our next category here. Most enjoyable album. This is the album that you just sort of sit back with. Sometimes we would put this hand in hand with like a guilty pleasure album if, for instance, your ratings may not really justify the amount that you're actually listening to it. But enjoyable just means it's something that's you're kind of addicted to, in a sense.
Regardless
very personal.
of how good it is or how bad it is, you love it. That's
Yes.
the definition of that.
And it means that regardless of all the little things that we rate these songs against, there's something that this song is doing right. Something that maybe eludes. Excuse me. Yes, that this album is doing right. That eludes everything else. Maybe the ineffable. Who knows? Anyway, a little bit of a repeat here. St. Vincent by St. Vincent. See, even though I'm taking it down in the artistic feel, I still think it is. I can't stop listening to the album. Even the tracks, I may go on repeat, but just all tracks are. They're coming from some high-minded and yet very rooted place. Perhaps this has to do with the fact that the front... Well, St. Vincent essentially is Annie Clark, and she used to work with David Byrne. That's how the saxophone sort of ended up, we presume, on Digital Witness. But in general, you think back to the stuff that David Byrne was doing, it was fun then. Well, if she's the 2010s version of David Byrne, that's what I want. That's exactly what I want.
When I was trying to find my most enjoyable album, one stuck out for me, but I couldn't figure out why. And I came up with this idea of what a truly enjoyable album is. It's not The Perfect Girl. That's your technical album, or that might be your best album. Your most enjoyable album is your best friend. Like you said, you love it in spite of its faults.
Even like how I love you.
Exactly.
In spite of all of your faults. Your laundry list of faults, in fact.
Yes, thank you. But Weezer's Everything Will Be Alright in the End. This I just couldn't. It was old school Weezer, it was new school Weezer, it was something out of left field from Weezer, and it was delivered in such a way that it adapts to itself. Even its lowest points, I still don't dislike the songs, I still don't hate the songs, but when you're having the Future Scope trilogy on an album that's also got Back to the Shack, I mean, you're doing something right here. And it's an album that I just played on loop for the longest time. I was actually very happy that I listened to this album for the podcast instead of getting it out on my own, because taking it with that critical eye, it was weird how much I enjoyed it, sometimes because of its flaws.
It's funny that you mentioned that you were happy to wait to listen for the podcast for your enjoyable album. I'm glad, that our enjoyable albums are all very different. I like that. It shows that when we're really in a comfortable mood, how much we differ in tastes of what we want to hear. My most enjoyable album was Lazaretto by Jack White.
Interesting.
Because I can't stop listening to it. I'm hooked on this album, and I, too, waited for this album. I knew about it months before it came out, and I was so giddy. I called it so no one else could pick it. And I was very excited to give it the first listen with the analytical ear. But my favorite thing about Jack White's record is, I think, again, because of its flaws, is what I loved about it. It ended up in a lot of places feeling like a compilation. But I like that. I like that he genre jumps. I like that one song sounds more like folk, one sounds like old school rock, one sounds a little bluesy, and one sounds modern rock. I really like that. And also, once we discovered the theme work that was in it, that just added another element to the last handful of tracks that really connected them together, that really sucked me in. I think Jack White is one of the greatest modern guitar talents. I think he does a lot of really great work. And I think if he were to just do an album of his guitar virtuosity, it would be a much higher rated record. But he likes to dabble and fool around and play, and that's why I really enjoyed this record, and it's my most enjoyable of 2014.
All right. Shall we go on to the third category here? Best lyrics.
Best lyrics. Well, lyrics are always dear to my heart. If you've listened to me wax eloquence on any song previously, you'll definitely know I point out good lyrics. And in this case, I have two choices. The two choices are for dramatically different reasons. One of the funniest tracks of the year, which we couldn't really do a category for because there was only one funny album we did, but YOLO by Lonely Island, the Whack album. I love what they do just to the idea of YOLO, to what this one generation says it means and what it actually means when you read the words. You only live once. There's such wit in that song, I laugh every time. On the flip side, and this is where things get unusual for me, Pusher by Alt J, This Is All Yours, is such an amazing song about love and has such beautiful imagery in it. This is why I couldn't make the decision between the two. Pusher was just a genius piece. You can only, I believe Steve put it best, an artist only comes across an idea like this once in a lifetime. And for Alt J, this was their idea. This was their penultimate song. Forgetting even the vocal work, the musical work that was involved in it, just what they said was so impactful for me. When I was listening to it earlier today, I teared up again.
My lyrical song was so different. You're talking
I'm so
about
excited that we're going to be all different in this category too.
You are talking about love and hilarity all in one, while mine concerns the subject matter of masturbating to an ex-lover. Arc Iris's second track, Lost on Me. This was a dark, dark turn for an album that I really had no expectations of, because she's Josie Adams, the front woman for this band, Arc Iris. It's, as far as I know, their debut album, and I really didn't know what the hell they were gonna do. It's sung from some kind of folk tradition, but at the same time, she's very rooted in classical influence. And as early as the second track, after a fairly open and I guess kind of inviting first track, the second track really took a dark turn. Allow me to read you a stanza here. Holding on, is it too long, masturbating on a sorrowed mind? Holding on, is it too long, masticating on an empty mind? Symphonies of words to please, your expectations constantly. Our molding minds are rotting waste, or each other's second faces. It's a beautiful and sorrowful, sorrowful image. Because somehow, and I don't know how, but she was able to tap in to this dark place of a woman concerned more with lust than love at a particular moment, and if anything, kind of indulging in that moment, and she expresses it in these lyrics most eerily, and I just thought the turn of phrase itself was the most engaging. You know, changing the words around from masturbating on a sorrowed mind to masticating on an empty mind. Same exact message in almost the same tonal variants, but different words, different meanings. It was a marvelous command of the English language, in my opinion.
My pick for best song lyrics is actually for a very different reason as well. I took the road of the social message and the content of the lyrics. And mine is actually related to the previous album I just mentioned, from Jack White's Lazaretto, Entitlement.
Unbelievable. Continue.
I love this song because its message about how we live in a social culture that believes they deserve everything. And his final verse locked in this song for me. I guess nobody on earth is entitled. Not mothers, not children, not kings. Not a one single person on God's golden shores is entitled to one single thing. We don't deserve a single damn thing. That verse made this song my favorite lyrics, as well as all of the others and the chorus, because it's so true. It's just flat out true. It's a great message that not a lot of people that I know of, that I've heard, and if there are, please put them in the comments, but not a lot of songs about entitlement, and this one was spot on. He knew exactly what he was singing about, and it was brilliant, so that was my best song lyrics.
I sit here aghast in the corner because of the fact that was runner-up for lyrics for me, and I decided that I could not leave this podcast without giving that song some kind of credit, so I brought back an old category that we actually omitted for this year. socially impactful, and it was for all the reasons you just said, and I believe I went on a giant rant at the end of that album.
Yeah.
Even though I may not have enjoyed the album on the same scale as you did, that song itself, and there were several other messages in various other tracks that spoke to the same themes, I recall, but this one just captured it in the best way possible. Everything you want a folk track to do: simple guy, guitar, acoustic, low-key atmosphere, to convey the issue, the dominant issue that he sees with society at the moment, and that is the fact that too many people are going around feeling as if they are entitled. Yeah. And I think this happens on all sides of the coin, regardless of your politics, regardless of your religion. It's just the simple fact that's the fallacy in our big social argument, is that we come in thinking that somehow we deserve more than the next person. If you find that to be the case, then you got a problem. And he captured it up beautifully, which I don't see any other artist doing. So may not be lyrics, but it got my surprise category.
This is also funny because last year me and Steve had the identical best song lyric song, which was Stuff Is
Way from
They Might Be Giant.
Hey, that was my runner-up last year. Come on.
So clearly we're on the same level still a bit. From here we go, though, to our first full album choice since Most Enjoyable, which is Most Moving Album.
We
changed the wording from Most Emotional because, I mean, emotional is a cliche term, and truly what this album and the song to follow, big surprise, is about is what moves us. It doesn't have to necessarily be a huge emotional impact or a specific emotion. It's just got to move you. And so I will take us into this. We foreshadowed it a bit, and Steve mentioned it a bit, and I think it's because of the huge, strong theme of it. But Singles by Future Islands is my most moving album, mostly because as someone who's suffered through bad relationships, through heartbreak, through delusions in relationships, this album really spoke to me. And what also makes it the most moving album, my most moving song, we'll tie to when we get to it. But the thing I liked about this lead singer, as good of a singer as he is, and he is, what makes him a great singer is the emotional conveyance of his voice. You always know how he's feeling when he's singing. He's singing with the weight of 1,000 pounds. You know he's burdened, and you hear it in his voice. And that, throughout the entire album, moved me. When he drops that weight and shows some joy in his delusions, and gets back under it, and gets miserable, angry, happy, you go through the roller coaster with him. And I think that it really touched me a lot, and I have a big thank you here, and I'll mention her later again, but the Living Statue Galatea surprised me with this record because I had no idea she was bringing it on until she told us, and it's still one of my favorites of the year. It may or may not be my favorite, penultimate, but definitely one of them.
It was very interesting, despite our rating lowers. But again, we're talking about very, very specific incidents here. Now, it's interesting that you noted that as the most moving album, because obviously this would speak to whatever specific aspect moves us individually the most. And in my particular case, I'm a lot more drawn. I think, rule of thumb, can't really be said this 100% for sure, but generally the music itself, or a particular chordal motion as it follows a certain theme, is what really, really gets me in the end, which is why that was close. It was a runner-up, but I found that, when I had to discount a lot of the music sort of just as a backdrop, it was there, it was appropriate, but it was a gaping hole, as I felt on that album. The content was there, the vocals were certainly there, but when you didn't have that musical edge, I couldn't give it that credit. Instead, mine went to an album that we talked at quite length about, episode 111's My Brightest Diamond. This is My Hand, which is, as the title it reveals, a very, very revealing album. It is her entire emotional center as a human being. And the funny thing about that album is it speaks more from a real-time perspective. The issue, I suppose, with Singles is that you're not sure whether it was real or not by the end. You're still kind of steeped in the fact that it may very well have been fantasy. But with every chordal sweep, with every transition, and there are so many transitions on My Brightest Diamond, I found that her album, This Is My Hand, just was moving front to back. She always found some way to reel me in and make me connect emotionally with the story via music, which is what I'm looking for.
And I am on the exact same page as you, Steve. I also went with This Is My Hand, My Brightest Diamond. The choices of just texture in this album is phenomenal.
Yep.
The transitions, just on texture, just on instrumentation at aspects, it's heart-wrenching. It's gripping. There's a reason I bumped it to a 5. This is a beautiful piece of art, and it is a full piece of art, and it's the kind of thing that just moves me, always moves me. I want to listen from front to end, even though I know parts are going to be tragic, and even though I know parts are going to be beautiful, and at times you don't really understand where it's going to go, and that's part of the point, because at her core level, the structure is there. We said she had a very compositional, skeletal, rigid structure, yet the meat on this piece, the actual brushstrokes to her art are so butterflies, are so light, so touching on top. It's hard not to feel as I'm listening to this album.
Mm-hmm. Such that even the reasons that keep it from being a 5 for me, which is only the fact that sometimes there are songs which don't quite hit the same heights as others, which is almost, something to just brush under the rug. I mean, so what? You have to have peaks and valleys in your album. And it's tough for me to actually withdraw that point too, because the peaks and valleys probably are why I put it there. At the same time, the peaks and valleys are what make it so incredibly moving. Sometimes in the moments she chooses to just sort of lax out a little bit between those incredible peaks, which I think are some of the most incredible peaks that we've listened to, even in the entirety of our reviews.
And now we move on to most emotional song. Now this is a little bit different. The most moving song is a song that contains within itself the entirety of what you're looking for, as opposed to the album, which has its sweeps, its rises and falls. A song doesn't have to do all of that. It can do just one thing. And for me, Arc Iris and the song Might I Deserve to Have a Dream was stirring. The harmonies, the strings, all of this being doubled by that grumble guitar in the background was such a contrast. It's hard. I get emotional. I think about it, and it's another one of those songs that just touch me. The string instrumental, though, that they go to in the latter part of the song is where it drives it home for me, because there is a pause. When the violin, the cello are working together, there's a half-second pause in just the notes, and they come right back in a sweeping high note, and it's at that point I tingle. It's at that point I'm getting goosebumps. More than anything else, that's something that's going to be, hitting me in that primal nature kind of a way. Hitting me in such a way where I can go, what are they doing? And why are they doing it?
For me, my most moving song connects directly to my album. It is by Future Islands, and it's the song Fall From Grace. The song comes towards the end of the record. And why I love this song so much is because you have an even-tempered, fairly melodic lead singer who sings very emotionally, but very even, no extremes. And then in this song, Fall From Grace, when you get to right before... It's the chorus, essentially. It's part of my reflection in the mirror at your feet. Before you go, please tell me. And then screams, was it all inside of me? Screams! And then brings it right back down to, I'll leave here in the morning. After screaming his heart out. To me, that gut-wrenching, guttural scream shows the raw emotion he's feeling about the delusion that he's in. And that really resonates with me. I've been that angry. I've had that kind of rage. And anyone who knows me from a hole in the wall knows I'm not an angry person. But to be pushed by a relationship and a deceit or deception so much that it makes you want to boil over in anger is a powerful, raw moment that I could not ignore. And it's it is the most powerful, emotional, and moving moment for me this year, which is why it's my moving song.
But see, that's interesting that you mentioned moving moment, and that will take us into our next category before after I say my most moving song. But see, now this is very important when you consider how to classify both a song and a moment. Obviously, moments are going to drive our love for specific songs, which is why we get into really, really tough tough areas here, really tricky situations. For me, I was close to taking several songs from My Brightest Diamonds, This Is My Hand, which is my most moving album, and saying, oh, well, those are my most moving songs. I had the choice between 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, and I found myself saying, you know what? It's really all about the moments on this album. This album is driven by moments almost wholly. That's its strength. It's also partially its weakness. That's, again, goes back to that little point 2 here. So I had to go toward a song that, in my opinion, encapsulated a moving thought front to back in a signifying, confident way, and this was Prince Johnny from St. Vincent, St. Vincent. So again, the album you have little issues here where they're dealing with strengths in some areas and then weaknesses in other areas. And often they cross over very frequently. In the case of St. Vincent, it had very, very strong songs. Other songs were a little bit weaker, but the songs that were strong were incredibly strong. And Prince Johnny was a track that concerns a deep emotional lament for a friend who is beyond help. And to me, that was just this powerful concept conveyed wholly every single time she reaches the height of her chorus at the end of every single phrase. It's a very, very powerful moment. But the song itself, you can't have that idea without the entire song. When she goes to discussing sweet times that they spent together, it shows this friendship as being very, very close, very connected, only to let you realize, once the chorus comes, that all those moments cannot save this person. Some people are entirely closed to repair. Otherwise, the song serves as a calling out to make people aware of this, so that they could perhaps take more of an active approach toward people who need help most. And at the end of the song, it's especially gripping when she reveals that she is the exact same way. It's an incredibly emotional song, and it fits the pop framework, which means that it can be felt by anyone. It's not going for high art here, but it is a high-minded concept.
I want to clarify that when I said that was the most emotional moment for me, it's an emotional moment because the rest of the song is so even tone and dark but even, and then that emotional discharge. The package of the song makes it the most emotional song, even though that's the most emotional moment. I just wanted to clarify that.
And going into our next category, since we're talking about moments, it is our favorite singular moment, a potential transition point of a song, a potential just note, or in my case, a song that felt like a single moment. Because while I was almost picking Prince Johnny, and specifically the phrase, pray to all, when she hits the note in all.
Exactly, that's the climax I'm discussing. Pray to all, and then of course she repeats this over and over as some kind of.
That's why I shied away from pray to all, because it wasn't a single moment. It was moments throughout the entire track, and it wasn't such a crux because it got repeated a little bit too much for it to be that one instant.
Of course, it's the climactic moment that it keeps returning to. But then again, it depends how you interpret moment. We can define that as something that we see as a reprise, of an instant.
And, well, I'm redefining the word moment again, just like I did last year.
Yes, with Evergreen.
I am going with Pusher.
Interesting.
All J. The way it's sung, everything about that. Lyrically, it is gorgeous, but when you start coupling that with how drawn out and slow burn the entire song is, both with the vocals and the guitar work, that late, almost fleeting piano work, it's a singular idea, a singular moment stretched out. I can't get away from that song. I'm enraptured when I'm listening to it, because I don't know how it's going to end every time. Even though I've heard it dozens of times, I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know when it's going to end, because it's almost a blanket on top of my mind when I'm listening to it. I don't see time passing when I'm hearing this song.
Since I particularly don't like to play by the rules, I will also redefine moment. Last year we talked about a moment between the three of us as hosts with Darlings of Lumberland. I won't get into detail. Listen to that episode, last year's year in review. This year, I have a singular defining moment because it was something that had been leading up to for a long time. I started talking about Schaefer the Dark Lord since the first moment we started this podcast, pretty much. And then back in episode
115.
he was our guest. He brought us the Beastie Boys record. And honestly, my favorite singular moment of this year on the podcast, instead of a song, because I couldn't really pick one, was reviewing a rap album with one of my favorite rappers. It was incredible to me. You know, I met Schaefer, I'd become a fan, and then we transcended fan to friend. And it's been really awesome. He's a great guy and a great musician, and it was just a really cool moment for me.
And a very liberal interpretation of this particular category. But you're right, because also you mentioned that you're not as focused on the moments as opposed to the result of an entire track.
Correct.
So it's fitting for you to omit that. But I will bring it back to music, and true to my words, I bring it back to the album that I think is defined by moments. My Brightest Diamonds, This Is My Hand. This is coming back for a couple of categories here. And again, it's because countless times throughout that album, she hits heights that reveal sides of her as a person and as an artist that I just have not witnessed from any other artist. She does this in several moments here, and it was really, really tough for me to pick a single one on that album because each track seems to hit a certain height, and combined with her booming vocals and of course her compositional abilities to bring everything together, she can phrase a particular moment to really, really give you chills. I will be a little bit liberal with this definition and not call it a moment as in a note per se, but as a sectional climax. In this particular case, I'm going for the bridge, the final bridge at the end of I Am Not the Bad Guy, which was the track on that album that she essentially embodies denial. Because the track is called I Am Not the Bad Guy. It's as if she needs to tell herself this. I am not the bad guy, I am not the bad guy. In the context of a relationship or of, well, any relationship, grounded in love or otherwise, we often have this need to prove ourselves or to prove how venerable we're being in certain instances, when very often we can overlook these things. We can forget ourselves and treat other people with disrespect without even realizing it. And I believe that this track is characterizing this kind of denial in the context of an argument between her and someone else, whether it's actually being spoken or not. There is denial here that everything is just slipping away. It seems as if this is doomed because she refuses to actually admit that very well, perhaps she is the bad guy. Going on to the moment here, the moment is the tail end, where it's the bridge is dominated more by anger. Granted, throughout this entire track, it's an amazing track. There's an ominous backdrop being built, which is as essentially the issues that they're facing, at a glance. You feel it behind. You feel these unresolved issues that just they're there. They're not going away anytime soon. And then all of a sudden, it explodes by her, revealing out in this. I will read the words here. Oh, my love, my sweet love, satisfy this longing. Indict me or let me fly. Though I still claim, and this is, her voice gives me chills at this moment. Though I still claim, I am not the bad guy. And it's shouted. It's almost meandering, and obviously her vibrato helps with this. It's almost unsure of itself, as if she has to convince herself in these words. Yet she's not falling short of her anger. It is absolutely chilling, and I feel her position, even though she may not feel her position. And amazing that music can achieve that.
Next, we move on to most innovative album. I always struggle with this category because, innovative to what? Innovative to all of music, innovative to a genre, innovative to an artist. You can kind of make a consent to whatever you want it to fit to. I was tempted to pick U2's album just to make my co-hosts' heads explode, but I didn't want to clean up the mess, so I didn't pick that one. However, I did pick an album that I'd forgotten about. I'd forgotten about it because we reviewed it fairly early. And as we do a lot of albums, and it's hard to remember everything, especially if it doesn't become the kind of album that you want to listen to over and over again, but you still like it. So that innovative album for me was Arc Iris by Arc Iris. The reason that I picked that album is because it's a unique take. Her singing, her playstyle is very folk influenced, but but it's the little techno additions, the use of technology, the use of her voice in an interesting way with that folk music that really makes that album stand out as something very innovative in a new folk genre, in folk in general, in rock in general, in the most basic of sense. It just seemed to be an interesting direction to take this kind of music. And while I like straight up folk and traditional music, I thought it was very interesting to have a very folk influenced album, but with a lot of the modern technology edge.
It's interesting. I didn't notice as much modern technology in that album. It was rooted in folk and classical, sort of, to me, which well, it's going to appear in my rating. It's already appeared in my best lyrics, because it was the biggest surprise album, I think, considering it was an album that I picked, and I didn't even have a premise for it. I just sort of picked it, said this sounds curious at a glance, and we dived in, and I was thrilled by it. But innovative, again, kind of a tricky thing here. I went to something a little bit more recent, only because of the folk influence in Arc Iris, and the many times that Arc Iris seemed to go back to country on that album. That was the only reason it kept from being innovative. But in terms of the classical implementation, I still think is excellently done and a close runner-up. But more recently, our fan pick, Owen Palette's In Conflict. I believe that he is the winner in this category because, as another composer, and this is the strongest year for composers, both Shar Warden of My Brightest Diamond and Josie Adams of Arc Iris and Owen Palette of Owen Palette, they basically master everything, and it's all coming from their head in the end. That's what's so fascinating by it. So whatever they choose as the next thing, or as their desired fusion of their personal interests, that's what the album's going to be, almost untainted. And in this particular case, it encapsulated the best of what I want to see from the merger between strings and electronica and brass. I mean, it was a playful album, and yet also very disturbed. I found the electronica to be the most intriguing because of the fact that it was right there alongside with the string work every step of the way. Nothing took a back seat. Nothing felt like it was simply there as a courtesy. You know, a lot of hip hop artists do that, for instance, where let's just throw some strings in the background. Meanwhile, it's like a soundbite from something repeated over and over and over again. But here, it was fluid, and there were several tracks on this album that they opened whole new doors just in terms of that combination of texture and the rhythm as well. The way, for instance, that he decides to play around with the pizzicato cellos, and I believe it was the third track on that album. Extremely fun and wildly unique.
Those were runners-up 2 and 3 right there, but when I first heard St. Vincent, it was just phenomenal, because it felt like what if Beethoven made modern pop. Like, the compositional work in such a, dare I say, lesser field of music. I don't know. Pop gets bad named all the time because it's pop. But this proves that pop has no reason to be mainstream. That it actually can defy its own name. When you start throwing in prog, when you start throwing in jazz, when you start throwing in electronica, and you fuse that together and keep it familiar, keep it approachable, it's becomes just beautiful. It's like she's the most OCD individual in the world when it comes to her composition, and having a freak out. She's drawing from here, from there, from everywhere. She's the most organized tornado you're ever going to see. Because it's got elements of this, that, and the other thing. It's got the kitchen sink. She's throwing that in there. But it fits so well.
I think I heard that somewhere.
It's not even blended. It is just purposely done from A to B to C. But to be so off the wall at times, I love what she's done with it. This is what I want, quote, pop rock to be.
I'll admit it's very innovative for pop. I had to sort of lean toward the composition side in the end, only because I know Annie Clark is an amazing composer, but I kind of wanted that on St. Vincent, and that's another reason why is lowered to a 4.75 because she still did everything within the framework of pop. But frankly, if we had a category on here for most innovative song, then Digital Witness would be doubled as not just my catchiest, but also most innovative, because shares the reason. On to the next category, Best Vocals. This is a song category, Best Instant or encapsulated throughout an entire song of vocals. Best ability, best implementation, however you see it. Anyone else want to go first?
You go for it.
All right. I'm back to Arc Iris on this one. Arc Iris, Josie Adams. Even listening back after the fact, this threw me for a loop as to how she was able to do this. And we've had plenty of really amazing vocalists this year, but for some reason, I went toward more the artsy reasoning here. Not the diva on stage. It's kind of like if, for instance, you saw Beyonce, and someone said, "Oh, that's going to be the best vocals," it would be a little bit redundant because Beyonce can sing. But there's something about the implementation in this particular song, "Canadian Cowboy," by Josie Adams and her vocals themselves. It stuck with me for a very weird reason. I was even almost unsure, so I went back, I checked, and I started tearing up within the first 5 minutes because of how she sings this. It is sung with the voice of a woman trapped in pure fantasy, almost pure lust, kind of like what I said about the lyrics back in the second track on this album. This was a little bit further along. It was either the third or fourth, I'm not sure. But in the lyrics, she conveyed the same thing there, and it's conveyed here in her vocals, to the peak, in my opinion. This is like a dripping romance novel, the kind that makes absolutely no pretense to be realistic, and the music supports that with this misty backdrop where the Canadian cowboy rolls up and is everything that she wants him to be at that moment. It's just, it's a 5-star song all around, but I chose this for, again, her vocals and her interpretation here. It's almost comical, again, toward the romance novel feel, because her voice is in a state of breaking, like she's choked up at the thought of him coming along. It's like falsetto, which is rarely applied to females, but that's kind of what it is. She breaks up out of her register and breaks back and forth in this waning uncertainty or a dreamlike state. It's absolutely chilling. She does this especially when she falls on "Fall on Me," which is right here at the well, actually it appears several times within the verses. Let me just read you a little bit. "Canadian cowboy, fall to me," and "fall" right here is held. "Slip your arms around my waist. Let me have a little taste of your worried lips of cigarettes." This is a Broadway musical. Every single moment is considered to not just bring in a realistic romance. Of course, it's not a realistic romance, but she's connecting with you on the playwright level simultaneously with the music level. So again, between that and her vibrato, this slow, pulsating nature, I just don't know whether to be turned on or a little bit creeped out, because she portrays a bit of creep in this song. Again, there's absolutely no realism to this. It is a depiction of the fantasy involved in a one-night stand or the imagination of one. Beautiful.
My best vocals goes back to a band, well, an artist, and an album that you guys have been talking about quite a bit, that I've held back on because I felt she had more focused places on my list. And that's Cher Warden and My Brightest Diamond and her song Resonance. It's the second last track on that record. And there's no moment. This song, from the beginning to the end, her vocals are literally out of this world. It's a song that sounds of another world, spacey, breathy, gorgeous, and her vocals reflect it. She has a beautiful singing voice, and I'm not going to bring up lyrics because just go listen to the whole song. This song is an incredible display of her talent as a singer. There are other moments in the album that display her talent as a lyricist, as a musician, as, a poet. This is purely... It has all those things, but it's absolutely her vocals. They resonate with me. Ha in resonance. This song is unbelievable. It leaves me speechless every time I listen to
I
it.
wish I had an edit button here so I could press it in front of your face. But no, that was a very close runner-up. Interestingly, for my moment, only because of the signature moment where she almost breaks from the verses like on a dime to the choruses, and there her vocals are just belting. But again, this is almost the silliness of these. If you see that as a moment or a characterization of vocals, I saw it as vocals throughout an entire song. I didn't hear it as much throughout the entire song there, but believe me, her vocals shine on that album countless places.
I chose a song that actually was a duet. Sort of. Only kinda. I think Steve's figured this one out already. Warm Foothills, Alt J.
And the recent one.
The combination of... Well, first of all, Alt J has a great vocalist, but bringing in a secondary vocalist and not singing in unison too often, except in those chorus work and a phrase work, but to have them able to trade off and beautifully, almost mid-syllable sometimes. The ability to go back and forth without a hitch was phenomenal. That was just so interesting. I after a while, I didn't really care what they were saying, but how they were saying it was so just perfect. It was a love story. Warm Foothills is very much on the nose as a kind of a sex story, almost to some extent, but it's just the two of them and their slight changing in perspective and the changing of the pitch was so great. It's got whistling. Even the whistling was just so cool. And it's got that pivot chord that Steve said over and over and over again, and I agree wholeheartedly because
Straining to remember, but you know what? If you ever want to hear it, or if you want to hear me explain it,
the pre-chorus,
episode 120.
I'll explain. Okay. The pre-chorus chorus work of your foothills as they rise and go all the way up.
Oh yeah, come back.
You're warm.
Yes,
you're
yes,
warm.
yes.
Female to male, your foothills, you're warm. It's pre-chorus, chorus, and then instrumental chorus work.
See, that's a moment to me.
Yeah.
But hell, whatever.
It was, but I'm not saying that was the only thing. It was the whole song and the way they just did that duality, not duet, but pure duality between the two musicians singing. It was just freaking awesome, and I love it.
Our next category is we go into another song category, most virtuosic or technical song. These words can mean the same sometimes, but they also have separate meanings as well. And I had originally picked one song because I really liked where he went with it, but I realized the whole song wasn't virtuosic. It was, I mentioned him earlier, Jack White's Highball Stepper. It was his instrumental track. If we had an instrumental category, it'd probably be my favorite instrumental track. But I decided it was only virtuosic in moments. He was not completely virtuosic on that track. So instead, I picked a band who is so virtuosic, you don't know there's two of them. That's, of course, Death from Above, 1979.
Interesting.
They're a band that are a bassist and a drummer and a singer. It's the drummer who sings?
Yes.
The drummer who sings. Very odd.
But on their song, Right On Frankenstein, listen to it and tell me it's just two people, because it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like a full band going nuts. He does stuff on that bass that I've never heard a bass do before. And that's why this is my most virtuosic song, because in Right On Frankenstein, you can't tell that it's just two people. They're so good at what they do. They're filling out a band with two members, and I love that. I was blown away by that song and that album. It's another pick of Steve's that blindsided me this year. But it was mostly in that song that you really get a sense of just what these guys can do, and it was brilliant to me. So that's why it's my most virtuosic or technical song.
Yeah, I feel like I won the year almost by accident this time. But it depends, again, how you perceive virtuosic. I considered that album, for almost the same reasons. I considered that more of a songwriting thing and just the way in which they make it seem so filled out between two people. So I'm thinking around, what is virtuosic this year? I feel like we had some easy answers, I think, the previous year. You think of things like shredding here and there. We didn't have too much shredding. In fact, the only instance I can think in which we had shredding guitar this year is not going toward a positive prize at all. No. So I interpreted virtuosic, again, as a bringing in the best combination of instruments. This is also on Arc Iris's Arc Iris, Honor of the Rainbows 1. It is
song.
the pure instrumental, with the exception of distant vocals in the background, simply just going over and over again.
That song was my runner-up.
It was
my runner-up.
It was very strong because that's a song that deals with peace if you don't count the those light vocals in the background, but it's a song that's a piece that's built off of sort of wide intervals that kind of phase back and forth to tight intervals. It's really if I were to change the title of this, I would frankly just say it's expert composition here. But it conveys openness and tension all in one. It's again an exercise more in intervals, I think, than chords. It's all these like suspensions and implications here, and of course a knife cutting choir in the background, which is those ahs over and over again. That's just it. It's an instrument essentially. It's like it's ancient. It's like the soundtrack to the end of the world. I remember saying that on the episode itself. It really is just something to behold. I consider virtuosic and technical, even maybe a little bit out of the character of an album that was comprised of some folk songs, some country songs, other greats that have already got my high ratings and prizes. But this is what I really, really want more of. I want people to bring in unblemished composition in the middle of these works to show really what music can do without always going back to verse chorus. This was just, a strike from the ether.
I'm actually a little surprised that Steve didn't pick this one, but I understand his reasoning because I chose this song for it's just stuck with me. Digital Witness. I had to go with Digital Witness from St. Vincent. The combination.
For virtuosic?
Yeah. I think it's just...
It was a straightforward concept to me, but it was a very, very original and innovative concept. As I said, would have put it in an innovative song category if there was one.
It's got such distinct and clear layering involved. Such distinct and clear composition involved. Very, very partitioned sectional work. But with all the complication that's thrown in here, it's not crowded. It's not cluttered. Every layer that gets introduced, and there's some disparaging nature in some of these layers when you're talking about a techno kind of an idea married with some old school horns. I mean, there's a lot going on here. It's
saxophones, not horns in this case.
Excuse me.
I misspoke earlier myself.
The way it moves is... It borderlines predictable, but in this case, it's necessary for you to know when things are going to stop, because otherwise you're going to lose the control of it. I mean, it's almost as if St. Vincent was losing control, that this was sort of an ether idea for her, because it's all over the place. But it works so well. I can't get away from it.
That's fair. I accept the rating. I think, again, that's more of an innovative concept to me. Virtuosic and technical involves a little more than that. But she did a lot with that one idea, which is the repeating saxophone motif. And the rhythms there are in themselves, though they are repeated, very technical. So I'll give you that. That's a good one. All right, that's all three of ours. Let's go on to Best Album Theme. This is specifically theme, and we'd like to make a distinction. We'll pair this with the following category, album arc, because theme talks about something that's more of a subject matter, something you can convey, and usually has to be conveyed through lyrics, although we've proven in the further past that it doesn't always have to be conveyed through lyrics. For instance, if your texture and sound effects seem to sound of an era, you can do something like Boards of Canada did back in episode 54 and convey a theme purely without lyrics. But it usually tends to be a little more on the nose, while arc is simply the emotional or it doesn't have to be emotional, any kind of conveyance that you experience over the course, the time of the album, the 45 minutes or so, the point in which it starts, the point in which it ends. It should play like you'd read a good novel. You feel the pattern there, and there's no holes. Let's start with theme first. This was something that had a little bit of a hole in the art category, but I really, really hold that the theme was strong. And I went for something more specific here. And runners-up, I'll say them right off the bat, were Singles by Future Islands. That was a really, really, really strong theme. But I guess I kind of wanted to go towards something that was less personal. I think it's easier to come up with a personal concept for theme. In other words, you talk about yourself, or you make up an idealized fictional version of yourself, whatever it has to be. I just think that's sort of par for the course when you're talking about music. I went for something that was more high-minded. Damon Albarn. I think this was such an interesting concept that he was going for with Everyday Robots, and Matt is...
I'm interrupting right now because I picked the identical theme. I struggled with this so hard because...
Me too.
I agree. I had the same problem. Singles by Future Islands is such a great theme, but I identified with it because I'm a romantic mush. Of course I'm going to identify with it.
Exactly.
But Damon Albarn's
this was
Everyday Robots...
we have to both discuss this now, but I'll trade off to you.
It's just the fact of this wave of technology that's taking over us on an everyday life, mixed in with his actual personal experience and locations, was really this kind of interesting concept of how his perception of technology and these everyday robots are kind of moving through society. That combined with his interspersed, the comedian whose name I'm blanking on, but the sound bites, what it is, wasn't it? That's in the intro of the album. It really puts you in a mindset of, okay, this is going to be interesting.
He includes very technical elements. At the same time, of course, there's elements that bleed toward the nature side, because that's, of course, what technology is taking us away from, and we don't yet know the implications of that. And that's what I love about this album most, is that, even though every single song wasn't really a pinnacle, I don't think it's really going to hit any of my other categories here for any other reasons, but this alone was a really, really, really great concept. It's very important to what we're dealing with right now and all that we don't know. Technology really is kind of a new thing to us in terms of what we now define as technology. I mean, to what they defined technology as 1,000 years ago is kind of pitiful by our current standards. We're dealing with about 100-year, maybe 3-generation experience with this, depending on how far back you want to go with the Industrial Revolution, and he encapsulates just how immersed we are at this particular moment. And each and every song is an exploration of a different facet here. Even in one instance, he goes, Mr. Tembo, how the elephant taken. That song kind of grew on me, at least in context with the album. It may have seemed like a little bit of a bizarre idea, but here it is, the elephant driven away from his home because people are moving in, can't stop progress, can't stop technology. Well, this is just a little slice of life for everything that we're facing right now. No one is really dissing technology. We are all products of it, but, at the same time, we're going to find it conflicting with other aspects of our being. After all, we are natural. We're human.
And also, you're listening to a podcast, so obviously you're using a form of technology to do so. You're not pulling it out of the air, and you're also listening to people who are using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, 9 pieces of technology just to do this podcast. Mm-hmm. Whereas there were people doing podcasts with one piece of technology, maybe 2, a microphone and a computer, or a microphone and a tape deck.
Just think, if it wasn't for this, we'd have to get a soapbox somewhere and just kind of rally people around us.
It's true.
And then we wouldn't be able to listen to anything. Yeah. We'd have to have live musicians come in here every single time we wanted to review.
For me and Steve, before we move on to John, I think that the reason I like this theme so much is because you didn't have to hunt for it, but you did have to look, and I liked that. Also, Damon Albarn is a man behind, one of the geniuses behind the Gorillaz. The Gorillaz always have a theme on every one of their records that's very strong, even though musically the arc is a little loose, because they do compilations. They do compilations sound-wise. They do all sorts of different stuff. But I think that helped Everyday Robots in that case, because it's just another facet of technology. Variety, access. So... I'll pass off for John, and am astonished that me and Steve agreed on this. That's a pretty awesome moment. It was
a bizarre one. Again, we're pulling from 50 albums here, almost for the year, and countless other songs. So crossovers are challenging.
And everybody knows how I like to do my metaphors. And I'm going to start this by this. I had to pick 2. I love themes. I love finding themes. Well, cheating-wise, one of them was Everyday Robots.
Obviously.
So I'm not even going to wax eloquence on this one, because you guys encapsulated the theme so beautifully. It's exactly what these two just said, so listen to it again, and that's my opinion as well. But my other one, because I love personal stories, and no, I don't think it's a cop-out to pick a personal story or to write about the personal stuff when you're talking about a high-end theme. This album is not really high-end thematically, though, but it was very touching, and it's something that I later found out the artist was intentionally going for.
Okay.
And that's Weezer, and the way River Cuomo did the new album, Everything Will Be Alright in the End. He specifically set out to do an album about relationships, something I saw in the actual album. I was able to actually parcel out, as I'm listening to the album, what type of relationships he's talking about. And he's on the record talking about, well, I wanted to do a group of songs that are about my relationship with my fans, and I was able to see those. I wanted to do a group of songs that are about my relationship with authority figures. He did those. His relationship with women. He did those. It's a 3-part theme work that he really did meld together to create a cohesive piece, especially when you start looking at the progression of the album itself as well. Because thematically, he also went from early early Weezer to mid Weezer to the Future Scope trilogy, where he's trying something brand new. It's a twofold, almost threefold theme work for me that is really powerful.
It's a fair point. It was on my radar, but I just couldn't ignore Everyday Robots, so that...
I chose not to ignore Everyday Robots in spite of Weezer.
Yeah.
Well, it's as I said before, just the difference between theme and arc. I think when it comes to theme, I'm looking for something a little bit bolder than the personal thing. Lots of people write about relationships, and a lot of people do them very well. One of those was Future Islands and their album Singles. But... maybe it didn't get the theme, but I think it won arc.
Okay.
Because for arc, I think that was really the fascinating element there. Again, okay, he's writing about a relationship, may or not have been real, we don't know. We're confused by this. We're trying to figure it out over the course of time. And it's an album that takes you through, chronologically, through this pattern of realization, and then denial, and then fantasy, and then remorse. It's a bizarre theme, but it's conveyed more powerfully through its arc. Because by the time you get to the end, it's like trying to solve a mystery, trying to solve some kind of great Sherlock Holmes mystery. You want to figure it out for yourself, and because he can be very, very abstruse. At times it's deeply emotional, but at the same time, you can't as easily put the pieces of this together like you can in other fallen relationship albums, because he purposely keeps you a little bit distant, and you get the idea that in the aftermath, assuming that it occurred, that he went a little insane. At least that's what's conveyed in the music, and, that's kind of like watching Cuckoo's Nest here. You're trying to figure out the characters as you go through a very, very murky lens. He gives you that lens, and that's exactly what I want in a novelized album, is a little bit of work for us, too. I think that was the most inventive arc that we had all year.
I'm doing the same, not the same album, but the same pretty much exact reasoning with one little change here. My Brightest Diamond underwent almost the same arc as far as the story progressed. Similar. But there was one element to it that definitely sets them apart, and that is My Brightest started very literally, very concrete in the here and now. And the way she changed up, and as the distance from the relationship became greater, you could see that lens of time allowing her to become more metaphorical. And that transition was very impactful for me. So when you start going from Pressure and the early tracks, and even her metaphors are very on the nose, very much there, you know exactly what she's talking about. The distance is giving her, maybe not rose-colored glasses, but causing her to squint at what she's looking at. And that time frame is so different from the way Singles did it, yet the theme work is so strong and the artwork is so similar that I'd give almost the same reasons.
Well, in her case, I think it was achieved more through music, and that doesn't dispute rating. I think that just says you saw it through a different lens. Which is funny because usually I do see Arc more through the musical pattern. In this particular case, I don't know why, but Singles was just reaching out to me because of the mystery content and the lyrics themselves. But you're 100% on the money with the musical aspect of things. I think that was the arc that she was striving for, and in her case, it was accompanied musically. It was just a little bit more on the nose with Singles, which is why I couldn't overlook it.
For me, my best album arc actually comes a little out of left field. I re-listened to it recently, and I really like the artist, and I really liked this album, even though I rated it a little bit above average, I believe. I don't remember the ranking off the top of my head. But Beck's Morning Phase, the reason that it got such a strong arc from me is because musically. It's an album that emotionally, it was moving in moments, but overall wasn't. But musically, it's very interconnected, interlocked, and moves together. It's very cyclical. Like the phase of a sunrise, sunset. It's very cyclical and very connected. And that's why I think I identified with the arc of that album so well. Because thematically, it wasn't very obvious what the theme was. It seems like a growth album. He's growing from this artist who is a little more mature to this wiser, gentler musician. There's a lot more folk on this album. There's a lot more regular straight-up rock, acoustic, because he's growing as an artist. He's coming into this next phase of his life, and I think the music really conveys that in a very strong arc, which is why I identified with it. It was nice to go back to it. I really like that record, and I think that this new kind of interesting folky direction that Beck's taking, I think can have legs and will really go somewhere.
That was interesting, and that's something I think I would dip back to the Beck's Morning Phase, because I remember really enjoying the first track on that, which was Morning, right? And wasn't the last track Phase? Was that
Something like that?
Yeah, well, that kind of works with the arc there. But I remember absolutely loving Morning, but the rest of it I wasn't able to latch onto it. I really wanted to, but I think that's worth a second look. Maybe it'll appear next year. We don't know.
And in our next category, one of three big new categories that we're doing, best opening to an album, best starting point. This is something that, well, I'm surprised we didn't actually do it last year, because we always bring up how an album...
The intro track is.
Yeah, how it first hits you.
It's an okay intro track. It's average as far as intro tracks go.
Yeah.
I probably could make
I'm cringing.
montage.
I am cringing.
montage. Well, because we have last year John going, wee, Weezer. And you could probably do that with me saying how good an intro track was.
Why do you think I started doing speeches?
Yeah.
But the opening, their first impressions of an album are telling. It's so important to have a framework to begin with. Chapter 1. Or even prologue. And Pressure by My Brightest Diamond is okay.
Same here.
So all three of us picked Pressure by My Brightest Diamond.
There's no argument here.
This intro, from the minute the drums start, you're just like, ooh, what's this?
What's this? Yes.
What's this?
What's
There's
this?
something in the air. But it really is. It's so engaging just from the drum line stuff. Like, because we're expecting a pop composer album and we're getting a drum line. Like
Drumline, tribal, chimes, techno, funk, bass.
And that's
flourishes. This is the first 25 seconds, 30 seconds. It's a phenomenal piece of work.
That's why I would define it sort of as a call to arms. Like,
yes.
I mean, I think that's what really brings you into the beginning of her story, which, as I said, as you said before, is already a very strong arc. But definitely the opening is the I think that lays it on the thickest, more so than any other element of the arc. More in the middle of the album, I do think you get segmented pieces of herself, which is just as impactful. But they perhaps could be reorganized. We don't know. But Pressure needs to be at the front, and it's very inviting. And what I love about it most is that it's not talking down to you. A lot of opening tracks that we get very often are safe tracks. Sort of like what you just did before. It's an okay opening track, but sometimes I think they see that as a positive thing. Very much, play it safe, bring in the masses, people who will accept it more openly. In which case, all right, great, you got a bigger audience in the beginning, but then if you're talking to people that may not have the attention span for what you do as a whole. So why not just go for the gold? And that's what she did here. The track itself, Pressure, is a long form song. It has a loose pop structure, but frankly, it's a lot more complex than that. It's still got all the quirks and all the things that's what make her such a great composer. And I love that she laid it on right up front.
And I think also what's really important about this being the first track, and most important about this track, it was freaking fun.
Oh, yeah.
It was a blast to listen to.
It's engaging. And it's completely engaging. It's a slap to the face right away. Wake up. Here you go. Here's my brightest diamond.
And it's so entertaining, like you can't not get up and get into it. And that's why I think also it's really important to engage an audience, but not in the safe way, but in a fun, entertaining way. And that doesn't always have to be safe.
That's the flip side of it. It's like if you do want to bring in the most people, then why not just go towards something that is fun rather towards something that will just mold itself to your audience. You want them to mold to you, kind of. You take the stand.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I'll take us into our next follow-up category, which is connected, which is best closing on an album. And this is where an album that I'm going to wax eloquent on later will first come up. I'm not telling you where, I'm just telling you it's coming later. And that's Owen Paulette's In Conflict. I am in love with this record as much as My Brightest Diamond and Singles and St. Vincent, if not more. His closing track, which is simply 3 dashes, a less than sign, which to depict an arrow pointing at the number 2 in parentheses. It's gripping, chilling. It's a great wrap up. This song does what closing tracks should do. Make you think, leave you confused, and make you want more. And that's exactly what it does. It's so open-ended, but emotionally powerful, just from an instrumental, that I think that it's by far the best closing of this year, because you have questions, but you're excited about your questions. It's almost like a cliffhanger or a stinger, like we've talked about in many other albums. It leaves you wanting more. And I can't wait for his next record. I'm a fan, and that track really just hooked me on.
It was strong. It was really strong. I thought that album sort of was very, very well bookended anyway. I think it had another very strong opener. I guess I sort of had to give it to. I was very curious in the beginning of his album, but I guess fun took over. That's why I went for opening in My Brightest Diamond. But as far as closing goes, that was up there. It wasn't an immediate runner-up, but I went towards something that was, I guess, a little bit more. This time I will use the word accessible, because frankly, I don't think there's anyone that doesn't know what this is. It's a lullaby. Rewind just one episode. Okay, go. Episode 118 as opposed to 119. Lullaby. It is exactly what it says. It's a lullaby, and it's in 3. That makes it a little bit more interesting than your typical 4/4 lullaby. But then again, there's really no rules when it comes to lullabies. I appreciated it for exactly what it was, and also for what it did a little bit further than what you expect. It was a lullaby that wasn't, I don't think, as traditional, perhaps, but it was the kind that serves its function. You actually do feel yourself falling asleep at the end, and I think that's important for the end of an album to have. Maybe it's a little bit tacky in the end, obviously that's kind of a little bit of a cheap way out, if you don't have a strong closer, but sometimes, and in this case I found it to be unique amongst the selection we were looking at. I think it was a very, very appropriate one. Not considering the arc, though. I kind of take arc out of the picture here, because I don't think there was anything in this album that really suggests that it should just be winding down to a close, although perhaps some things do. If you go back to that episode, we do discuss something along those lines. But you know what? Just in terms of the way it closes the album out, I was very appreciative that someone would sort of return to a lullaby format. It was very, very well done. Not tacky in the slightest, in my opinion.
My choice is a real long ending. Or short, depending on how you actually look at the songs. The Future Scope Trilogy from Weezer. Everything Will Be Alright. And I'm not saying the entire piece, because while it started rock in part 1, The Wasteland, And in part 2, Anonymous, it becomes somewhat anthemic, somewhat punkier, a little bit more close to their roots. Both those two parts were more not ambient, not even close to ambient, but it's like Weezer trying to be ambient. Weezer trying to be prog, if you can apply that term to what they're doing. But they Weezerfied it. It's still, 4/4 kind of a setup. It's still very much a safe song. But in the final track, the Return to Ithaca, the bright lights that the music is doing, the warmth that the music is doing, the return home feeling that I'm getting in Return to Ithaca is so impactful for that trilogy and for the album as a whole. It took almost the whole album to really set it up, and it definitely took those first two parts to do it. But the way the drum and guitar interacts with one another, the hope, the classic ending that they put in that song, just culminates in a very finality. Now I can rest kind of a feeling. Now I can actually sit down and stop. Which, with all the other songs that they were doing, the back and forth and the speed that Weezer tends to put in their albums, even in their slow songs, this had such a finality to it that it really became the period on the end of the statement here. That, and just the combination of really the way they broke out of their shells and just had fun with the instruments for 7 minutes. Not really worrying about the words going on here, but just had fun. Just almost as a fan service. I got to give it credit for that too. A little bit of credit, but enough credit that it really became my choice.
So I was feeling acoustic and you were feeling epic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good duality.
Feeling question marks and doom and gloom.
Yeah, right.
This is a great place
good.
to go into Best Transition, which is our final category in this part, which is exactly what John just talked about. So I don't really have to explain that much. My Best Transition, my perspective on Best Transition, is for these three songs, from Wasteland, which is part 1, part 2, which is Anonymous, and part 3, which is Return to Ithaca. Between those tracks, the transition is so seamless between those tracks, it feels like one giant song. And I love when albums do that. As one instrument's winding down, another one's coming in, there's no gaps. It just goes from one song to another. And
yet the songs are still separate. You can still identify them. That's the important part.
And so I think that those transitions were peak, because I didn't even really know there were transitions there. Like, the transition that's so smooth, you don't even know you're going between songs, is kind of one of my favorite kinds of transition. And for all those reasons that John just stated, the song just goes from level to level and is so interconnected. It's just a smooth ride, a smooth transition from point to point. So that is my best transition.
I will return to your best vocals on this one, Resonance, because of a sectional transition. I had to define this as a transition itself because, between songs is one thing, but very often songs treat themselves as if they are two different things. And even within that, obviously, just the transitions between verse and chorus, or verse and bridge, chorus and bridge, whichever. It really is the kind of thing that can sound very, very clear-cut and dry, like we've heard it for the last, history of pop music verse-chorus structure, or it can leave you with chills. This is one that did. I'll give you the timestamp. 52 seconds on Resonance is that moment where Shara Warden decides to burst forth. This is on My Brightest Diamonds, This Is My Hand, Resonance. She jumps out almost of nowhere. It's this kind of background. You already pretty much talked Resonance to death, so I won't really give you I won't give you the theme itself, but from a very, very silent, murky atmosphere where everything is just hazy and unsure of itself, all of a sudden she bursts with this I can only call it longing, and she somehow her voice is able to embody that more than anything else. I mean, longing is something that is very, very tricky to do, and I feel like almost all musicians try to do it. And again, something that very well could come across as tacky. But when you combine that with all of her effects, the string backdrops, everything like that, it is absolutely chilling. So it's a transition from the verse to the chorus here, and it only appears twice in this song. So it's those two distinctive transitions. Interestingly, not because of how they transition or how gradually they do so, but because of how sudden they are.
I chose the song for pretty much the same exact reasons again. Actually, it's once again in the chorus work, and this is a song that's making a repeat appearance. The pivot chord of Warm Foothills is still such a defining moment in that chorus between, and it once again appears twice, but between the first half and the second, it goes from almost dreary, kind of uplifting, I don't know, it's got a darkness to it, but once it hits that chord and changes over from your foothills to your warm, it completely reinvents what's going on. The scope of the entire song so suddenly changes. The setting is just reinvented, and it happens twice, and each time, both times, it's a complete reinvention. The tonal shift is dramatic, though it's subtle. It's a beautiful combination of the two, and I love it. I love it. I just love how on a dime they go just one emotion to the next.
Now we move to the booby prizes, because everybody loves boobies. Especially since I work in the burlesque industry and do sound for it. It's a known fact.
But in this case, it's a negative thing.
Yes, it's a very negative thing. These are the booby prizes. These are these are the worst of the year for one reason or another. There are some positive notes, but all in all, this is the crap. So let's get into it. Most ubiquitous. We chose this wording. Steve particularly picked it because it's describing one of the herd, just something that just is almost forgettable. And so mine was an easy choice. It's unfortunate because it was a fan pick, but then again, you roll the dice when you recommend something. It was Rise Up by Saliva. It was so ubiquitous.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I didn't even know.
I mean, a bad one. I mean, continue.
It was so ubiquitous, I didn't even know they changed singers until I looked it up after. They had a new lead singer for this album as opposed to the older ones.
Really? Oh,
Yep.
wow.
So I'm not going to go on about this because I have explanations for other ones. It was unmemorable. I didn't remember any of the songs from it. It was completely forgettable.
Interesting. Yeah, ubiquitous, it started off as most generic, but it really comes down to the fact that ubiquitous is an artist that's not trying to make any strides. Even if they feel they are, it's just, again, sometimes at the end it comes down to competition. I mean, you want to sound better than the rest. Music is competition. Anyone in the business knows this as much as they may not want to admit it, but that's what sells, is people who can exceed their neighbors. And there's a lot of people who just settle. And as far as I'm concerned, the quintessential settler are the ones that settled on their own sound, and that is U2's Songs of Innocence.
Yup.
They didn't just sort of copy what else was out there, because a lot of people have copied U2 now. They copied themselves by doing so.
They copied people who copied them.
Yeah.
That was the worst part.
The only reason
even if they didn't really, but the fact is, the way it appears, if you just sort of, pick up YouTube from, the early 1980s and then drop them here in the 2010s, there's just, you gotta push further. I feel that even, our first album of the year, which didn't make any prizes bad or good, but our first album of the year, Paul McCartney's New, I feel like he was doing more things with that album, because Paul McCartney can always reinvent himself.
No, not at all. I re-listened to that album.
No.
We'll get
Okay.
into that later.
All right,
yeah,
fair
we're gonna
enough.
get to that real
But-
soon.
Well,
yours U2
let
as well,
me
John?
just
Mine was U2,
clarify
yeah.
something really quickly, though. However you feel about that album, I feel that it is not completely in character of his previous work or of other works. However you feel about the rating of it, that's one thing. But as far as U2's sound was concerned, it was just U2 doubled, and it was not the best of U2. Many songs here, I even caught melodic phrases here and there, which just sounded like they were completely lifted from their own
And
work.
I believe I helped you out there, actually trying to find what songs they were going
Yeah,
to.
and we succeeded.
In almost every instance, yes.
I only picked Rise Up by Saliva over that because I literally don't remember it at all. It's completely forgettable.
No,
U2,
no, I should have picked
remember a
Rise
bunch of
Up.
those
I
songs.
should have picked Rise
I
Up
can't.
because I did in fact forget we did that. But U2 is so mainstream. So the
is
herd.
Rise Up.
They are the definition of arena rock.
That's the thing. That's a good explanation because
And
U2
arena rock is supposed to be reaching everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the definition
it's a
of something
genre
that is the definition of ubiquitous.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. I
There
think
it
we've
is.
already given this way too much time, as it were, because it's ubiquitous.
Yeah. Anyway, you made us do it, so don't even complain.
Next, I want to talk about my best attempt because I do actually have some words on this. Best attempt for me was Sonic Highways by Foo Fighters. And the reason that is because they tried something new. it didn't work as well as we had hoped for something super awesome and original, but they tried something new, and I respect that a lot. And I think it was the best attempt at trying something new. They could have done more with it, probably, and I hear that it's really great paired with the TV show, which, if that worked, then great. The album itself was not perfect, but I think that I like the fact that they tried something that no other band had really done, specifically stated had done. So that's my best attempt.
Fair enough. Mine goes back a little bit to the early part of the year. Despite what I just said about Paul McCartney, I still don't think that quite reaches a best attempt, really. It was just sort of Paul McCartney trying something else, which, however you interpret it, is up to you. I saw the best attempt as something that was very, very personal to a certain person, and that it was the frontman for Against Me and his album Transgender Dysphoria Blues. I think that this album really had an emotional center. I do. I just think it was buried behind a mess of music that could have gone places. Several times I actually almost got this stuff stuck in my head only because I kept hearing it at a record store that I frequent in Jersey. But they were playing it over and over and over and over again to the point where I actually kind of did get it stuck in my head, even though it was probably completely out of your memory. But you know what? I really do see the emotional center here. Obviously, it should be mentioned that this, it says it right in the title, Transgender Dysphoria Blues, coming to terms with being transgender, newly transgender, or having always been so, and then coming to terms with having to share it with everyone else at the same time. And there were some tracks on there which I feel like warranted so much more than the music that he gave it, but sometimes it did poke through. For instance, the track in which he discusses how he will lose his relationship with his daughter because things will inherently not be the same again. Not necessarily that they have to, but just because, well, we have gender roles, and sometimes we put a lot of importance on them. So obviously you can't have the same traditional father-daughter relationship again. It was a very, very powerful concept considering his recent coming out, not only to his family, to his band, to his friends, but the music itself is just flat, old, traditional punk, been there, done that, punk modern indie with an indie twist. I could hear the emotion, but it couldn't turn heads, and it should have. It really should have.
Lonely Island's the whack album, and not because I think they succeeded in one respect, and that is to make a comedy album, and to make a great comedy album. It really is hysterical. But to make a great album, they really did fall short. And I think that was mostly because it's sort of the same thing that happened with Robbie Williams. They were stuck doing one thing to make the joke. And theirs was significantly more blatant. But because they were stuck doing one sort of idea to make the joke, they couldn't musically push it as far as I think it could have gone. Because these guys are not... They're the opposite of idiots here. They're very intelligent about this stuff. It's a little bit just shoehorned in the framework of musical styles they're working with. That being said, they get so close in making like real awesome songs that you would forget are supposed to be comedic at times.
You actually just reminded me of something, because I think, using one trick a lot of times is the reason for falling into these little traps. I think that kind of takes me back to Against Me's Transgender Dysphoria Blues, because he used one trick. The trick is what he knows, is the rock that he's always accustomed to. More than that, it's the theme. It's the character, the quintessential emotional track or acoustic track that coincides with his recent emotions. But, be a little bit more... inventive with it. That's something that we all know already. We all know coming out stories. We've had plenty of it, and frankly, I was much more impressed by the very distant allusions that were made in Owen Paulette's In Conflict. Regardless that he's not transgender, there were definitely coming out stories there, and it far more moving, far more inventive. That's how you tell your story.
In fact, actually, Owen Paulette was my runner-up for best attempt.
There you go. Well, really?
Really?
Yeah.
Attempt? See, now
No, he said
there was two. No. As a whole of an album,
Nope, wrong.
I think it could have gotten as good as some of the other ones that we've been talking about
it was
today.
better than them.
Yeah,
What? No. What, singles? I'm talking. It could have been.
We'll get into it.
Singles. It could have been
No, it was. It
My
absolutely
Brightest,
was.
but it was just
No,
on the
it
cusp
wasn't.
it was
of
better.
missing out.
It was better than singles.
For sure.
Yeah,
and My Brightest Diamond.
That's one of the reasons why I lowered singles, is because recently they shared the same rating, and I realized I can't justify that when singles, the music fell behind. But Owen Paulette, everything was in sync.
Yeah, I would have to disagree on that, but that's fine. We'll move on to biggest disappointment, because I decided Foo Fighters wasn't a disappointment. It was average. That's not that disappointing. My biggest disappointment of this year took us all the way back to our first album of the year, A Man Who Should Know Better. Paul McCartney's New was a horrible, horrible disappointment.
It wasn't a horrible, horrible disappointment, though I'm agreeing with you. It was...
I did a chronological listen this year, and I went back to listen to that album. I really did see old Paul McCartney in there, and some catchy tunes. If you want to grade it on an album scale, well, then you have to consider the fact that Paul McCartney has never always done albums that had this arc and theme. He writes catchy songs, and some of those songs are still very catchy. That's a mid-range. It's not going to hit any successes or booby prizes on
my problem is that
it's fair.
Is that the expectations are significantly higher for Sir Paul McCartney, because
I felt
he's
that's unfortunate.
I know, but frankly, I want more from him,
and also
I need more from
I know that's
him.
why people might put U2 up there, but believe me, mine was just purely for the music and not for U2's
this one's selfish. This one's pure selfish. I wanted more.
Biggest disappointment is going to be personal, and for me, I'm the same as John. I expected better, and I didn't get it.
I also sympathize with the age factor just a little bit in his particular case. I think the catchy things surprised me, and also relating to youth still surprised me. And there were some tracks there which also talk about his age. I just think that's what you're getting from Paul McCartney in your 70s. You know what? Leave it alone. It's just how I see it. Even the songs that I was kind of making fun of for a little while, I still secretly found myself singing along to later. My big green bus. Anyway, I will take us into the next category here. I'm sorry, I haven't done my most disappointing, excuse me.
We already know.
Yeah, well, that's very recent. It was our well, you did Foo Fighters for that. No, that was not... That wasn't under that, but that was under Best Attempt, sorry.
Yeah.
Episode right before that, episode 121, we did TV on the Radio's Seeds. I hate to do this also for the personal reasons in that maybe they were affected, or they just had a different and very personalized interpretation of how they were going to deal with the death of their longtime bassist. And that's why I hate to really even include this in a booby prize. But to me, as far as their sound goes, again, it's the problem of conveyance. I just don't think it served as the best ode to me because of all the generally positive, party-going, it may have all been ironic, but it just didn't hint at that in any place. Not in enough places. A couple of places, the art of it was a little bit too abstract, to the point where you have to question whether that was really born from the artistic source that you want it to be born from. This is a really tough thing to explain. But frankly, as far as a personal experience goes, I know they have done so much better. So I will leave theme out of it completely and just say from a musical standpoint, they settled somewhere. Maybe they don't even know it. I don't know.
Next, we're going to talk about the most derailed song. This is a song that's either derailed by its lyrics, its music, both. Doesn't make sense at all. This is a gobbledygook, a mishmash.
Maybe it was perfect up until minute 132, and then all of a sudden, what are you guys doing?
Allow me to go here just because it'll follow directly upon my previous statement. This is also from the same album, TV on the Radio's Seeds, the song Ride. It is the moment that I kind of felt that I had to bring theme into the mix, even though I chose not to for the sake of disappointing album as a whole. I do have to do it for Derailed Song. Ride had the most beautiful exposition on the album. Not the most beautiful exposition ever, but it was strong. It was really strong. It was sort of a dirge. It was an ode. It felt like a funeral dirge, at least. I was very connected with the loss at that moment. Then, all of a sudden, on a dime, we shift. And it concludes with, I shouldn't say concludes, halfway through, it goes to a wall of 16th notes and frankly, subpar vocals from Tunde Adebimpe. Really, really bizarre. It starts throwing in random things. You know, the melodic soundbite from Ring Around the Rosie makes an appearance in that song. It is just, I find no logical explanation to it, except perhaps the need to move on immediately, but I found it distasteful in context.
Wow, he's passionately upset about that one. I've gotten enough distance from my derailed song to not be as upset, but Metalizer by Judas Priest doesn't make sense, is terrible, and is gobbledygook. A derailed song, you're right, can be a moment in the song that derails it. For me, this was derailed from note one. It just, the lyrics were made up, the word Metalizer doesn't make sense, the lyrics don't make sense. I expect better from Judas Priest. They're a good band, a really good metal band.
They're another one that's grappling with age, though.
And so I expected better, and I expected sense, at least. Or metal sense, which is like demonic stories, whatever. It was it wasn't even a narrative that made sense. So that's my most derailed song. That's enough of that.
My derailment actually occurred also where we're going to go into the next topic as well, the saved. The derailment was Left Hand Free. Had no place. Had no place on the album. In fact, they said they made it specifically just to gain notoriety in the United States. But frankly, the follow-up of Garden of England and the interlude was solid. It got me right back into the album. It did fold it over to the point where I can go, oh, Left Hand Free really doesn't exist anymore.
See,
but that's fair, though. Derailed in this particular case was very momentary, and it was a whole. But I still think that's a good selection.
See, for me, that's why it was my most derailed album. Even though we're not going to go into too much detail about this, that song derailed the whole album for me. Because I was like, well, this is
we were questioning the overall sound again, you know, and that's very much like what I was doing here with TV on the radio. The second they made that shift, you know, I couldn't classify them at this point, and when I was always able to classify them as something very unique. Well, that'll take us into our final category.
I was going to say, I think
song.
we've given the worst enough time, but let's get into the worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst. This is something where we're not looking for specific things. It's just when you add it all up together, this is the stuff that's most problematic to you as a whole. And for that, I was very close to copying Metalizer in this particular case. Metalizer was there because it was just so weird. It was going to be my worst song because it was completely made up for the sake of being your metal track, your arena rock metal track, which is almost just as bad as, you know, doing it for the market, you know, the United States market, as Alt J did. You don't want to hear that stuff in music. That's like learning there's a Santa Claus, you know. We did it for the money, you know, in this case.
So what was your worst song?
This was really tough. I even tinkered around with a couple of other tracks on the Judas Priest album, but I went right back to TV on the radio, and the song that followed my derailment ride, and that was the song Winter. Worst song of the year. It perpetuates and worsens the qualities in the final half of... And maybe I'm not just talking, you know, bear in mind, I'm coming from a personal place here, so maybe I'm just very heated with this. But I think it's appropriate when you consider most of our work. All of the wall of noise that we got in the last half of Ride is accentuated in Winter. It's still a wall of noise, added with distortion and incomplete melodic phrases. They just don't go anywhere. The entire song is like this front to back. There's hardly a hiccup in it. And I found it, coming from a bad place as I had already had with the previous song, this was, you know, kicking me when I'm down a little bit. And it was almost impossible, even though there were some better songs after this, it was almost impossible to really save the album in my mind. It seemed like they fell asleep for a section. And again, I just have to question myself. What was the deal with them saying this was they considered this their best work yet, except if they had a very bizarre construed interpretation of what they perceived to be an ode. Or mind the wordiness.
Maybe the word best has a different definition.
I don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, my worst song, which I know for a fact is Matt's worst song, Bring the Sun /
Toussaint
L'Ouverture. No, it's L'Ouverture.
L'Ouverture.
L'Ouverture. Swans, To Be Kind. I did like a lot from that album. I couldn't quite find a place for it in my best of year stuff, but I did like a lot from that album. But that 35-minute POS is freaking ridiculous. It is unbearable. It is way too long. It could be cut in half into the 2 songs it was meant to be, and it would still be way too freaking long in both in iterations. It is the longest build that never culminates in anything and goes absolutely nowhere.
It's a wall of noise.
No. It should be brought out back and shot.
It's a wall of noise. It's way too long. It's aggravating. It's anger-inducing. I hated this album almost as much as my worst album because of this song. I hated this album too, but it's not my worst. It was just because there's still a technicality and a skill with this band that I respect, but this song is god-awful. It's 34 minutes long. It shouldn't have even been 10 minutes long, 5 minutes long. It was crap.
It's tough for me to remember that song specifically because, there were a few songs on the album for an album that was extremely long. It was our only double album, and it's our longest review yet. But what's interesting is that I guess each individual track there, I found myself at least, granted this is not a good word, but I use the word enduring for it because I'm curious as to what will come next. And every once in a while, they did do something very surprising. So what the question is your 30-minute wall of noise, equal to my probably 4-minute wall of noise that I got from TV on the Radio's Winter? I don't remember a single hiccup in Winter, but I do think I remembered something, even if it was minimal in every part of that album. To be kind, I could be mistaken.
Well,
but in which case,
I re-listened to that track today, and I wanted to bang my head through my monitor.
Maybe you're right. That would be very much in line with my reasons in our last year's 2013 year in review for when me and you agreed on Deep Chords, Somer. Which John was quite mad about, but
I wasn't really mad. It was a little bit of chagrin.
But to me, that was an album of the same thing, as far as I'm concerned.
But since me and John are in agreement,
time is important.
Worst song, we shouldn't stop there, and we should be in agreement of worst album, which we are. I don't know if Steve's on the same page, but our worst album of
looking like I am,
Redeemer of Souls by Judas Priest is without a doubt. I'm not done. The worst record of the year, and here's why: because it's not just disappointing. It's not just ubiquitous. It's not just derailed and bad. It's all of those things.
The problem, the pain about it, I think, is because we know that, and I know this just from a musical standpoint, that there's some chops that went into making that album, like the shredding that goes in. Not everybody could do that. It's really difficult. The problem, and this is all about result. Music is an artistic form. It's about how it appeases the listener. And I guess if you're a hardcore metal person, actually, I don't even think if you're a hardcore metal person, because you're going to know what's in your genre, and you're going to know the good stuff that's out there, the better stuff. Why would you want just something of the same? Again, similar indictment as I gave to U2. But the problem is that U2, in this case, I use hiccups in the positive way. You have to really skip around, flip it around on end when you're talking about the worst of the worst. The hiccups are positive in U2. You have moments where you're like, that was a good idea, expand on that. You have moments in TV on the Radio Seeds, that was a good idea, expand on that. There are all these moments in these albums that in general we haven't rated very highly. But
this had
Redeemer of Souls was the same shtick, and it was kind of demeaning the shtick. Like, for instance, when I get a Black Sabbath song, I genuinely believe that they're in the lore. They're immersed in the lore. They're creating it as they go. But this was like a parody.
Yeah, it was almost so bad. It was almost a parody. Yeah,
it really was. Especially when you talk about Metalizer, Hell and Back. These tracks, they have very little going for them except for the solo, in which you can only sort of say, oh yeah, that fell into place like it felt it should have.
Yeah. I want to move on now to our winners of the
Wait,
year.
I said nothing about this album.
What do you have to say?
Screw this album.
Okay.
There we go.
Now I want to get on to the winners. I want to go first for best song because
gotta shift gears here.
I feel like none of us are really going to have to go too long on our best song about best album because I'm imagining we've talked up the albums and songs that are coming up. That said, my best song of the year is a song that could have been in places that you guys put it in, but it had all of those things. So it's why it's my best song of the year, and that's "Digital Witness" by St. Vincent. The song is
my runner-up.
The song is catchy. I'm into it. I could listen to it on loop for an hour. It's just like John said, and I'm not going to go too long on it because there's no reason to. It's got all the parts. It's an organized tornado of amazing, and I'll leave it at that.
The question of whether is my run, I mean, what song is going to be my runner-up and what's just winning is really just depends on your mood at the time, and it's off the same album, St. Vincent, St. Vincent. It's either Digital Witness or Prince Johnny, and I was feeling Prince Johnny on this one because I feel again it's something that almost everyone can relate to. I'll read the lyrics here. I withheld before because I think this got an earlier mention of mine, but this time I will read the lyrics. Prince Johnny, you're kind, but you're not simple. By now, I think I know the difference. You want to be a son of someone. This emphasis on importance. Everyone wants to feel important in the world.
Remember the time we went and snorted that piece of the Berlin Wall that you extorted? And we had such a laugh of it.
Prostrate on my carpet.
This is my choice. I'm in full agreement with you. This was number 2. Let me go through the list. This is number 2 for catchiest song. I really did think it was right there behind Birth in Reverse. Best lyrics,
catchy.
Most moving, favorite singular moment. I did give it an honorary mention. It just wasn't the best at anything, but it's second best in like 5-6 categories for me. There's no other way to explain it.
And this time I'll really put more emphasis on what I tried to say before, that chorus. Saw you pray to all, to make you a real boy.
It's not all, it's all.
Oh yeah, and it's I mean, again, it really has every single element here. It has the catchiness factor because it's a very simple melody and everyone can jump on board to it, but it's not playing it safe. The high-minded is the wrong word here. It's deeply personal, but it makes it relatable because everyone probably knows someone like this. Or, if you haven't thought of it, maybe after listening to the song, you will think of that person. Give them a call. I don't know. Spend some time with them. Try to get into more of their life, perhaps, than just the small talk that we generally use as a cover for everything. Everyone wants to have personal connections, and personal connections are not easily achieved. You have to work toward them, and that's when you get the real rewards of having that person to vent to, and you can vent back with. It's a lot more open that way, and that's generally what I perceive as the meaning behind the song. But then when you add in the other elements, such as the fact that it's the music is tied 100% with that emotion in the very, very light kind of misty 80s pop backdrop, but it's all about her voice and the rumbling bass beneath it. The importance, the weight of this scenario you feel every moment, because the price will probably be the person's life, because that's what's implied at the end of this song. You get the sensation that a suicide has occurred because, certain attention wasn't paid to. It's a very, very important song, I think, for the world. So that's why it just beat out Digital Witness, because believe me, I could play Digital Witness to the end of time, but the meaning, as far as I'm concerned, is almost secondary. In this case, I think it captured all ends.
Well said. I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks.
No, you're welcome. On that, we go to Best Album. Anyone want to start?
I'll go first. So Best Album for me was really tough this year. We had a lot of major players. Singles was great by Future Islands. My Brightest Diamonds, This Is My Hand was fantastic. Even ones that weren't as high up on the charts, but on the ratings, but still really great records, like Everyday Robots and Lazaretto. Weezer's newest record was very surprising and very good. It was a relief, too, that it was good. But mine was unbelievably leaps and bounds above everything else. And it was not actually picked by anyone in this room. It was picked by our fan, Heather S., who's very active on Twitter with Crash Chords. And it was Owen Paulette's In Conflict. This album, still, every time I listen to it, gives me chills. It blows me away. I didn't think I'd find anything this year that would compete with Godsticks last year. I really didn't. I liked Digital Witness, but not Digital Witness, but St. Vincent, but for different reasons. But Owen Paulette's In Conflict, every song, it just hits its mark. You get the emotional connection. The lyrics are solid. The vocals are solid. The music is solid. His composition is on another level. His music is on another level. His story, his emotion. He approaches social conflict and social things, but not with throwing it in your face. It wasn't a Macklemore. It's not, I'm gay and I need, gay rights and all of this. It's talking about his personal experience with his homosexuality, and it's almost conversational. It's not a thing. It's part of him. That's it.
He doesn't try to encapsulate it in like this sort of broad spectrum story. It's about singular moments he experienced with real people, and very personal, almost diary type moments. It is very powerful, and that's what needs to happen if you're going to take that personal edge. Go for the gold.
And so that's why that's my album of the year. The 2014 Crash Chords Matt Storm album of the year is Owen Palette's In Conflict.
Episode 119, listen.
That's why I actually said it was the best attempt. Because it was such a monster of an album. I almost chose it for best attempt because it was going to be runner-up. It was going to be number 2 for me. I gave it a 4.75. It's not really a booby prize. I was just trying to give it second place in this case. I like it more than St. Vincent. Even though I love St. Vincent, and I think it really is a masterpiece, Owen Palette is a little bit more accessible, to be frank, and that's a big plus. But my best is My Brightest Diamond. I can't do anything else. I really can't. It's just everything in that album just was a perfect storm of solidity, of story, of music, of vocals, and oh my god, I fell in love with a woman I never saw before. That's how good of an album it is. Okay, no argument from me. The only one that actually I kind of look back and would say almost the same thing was St. Vincent, but frankly, My Brightest Diamond emotionally connected with me so much more and just blew that out of the water.
Well said. There were 3 rankings this year, as far as I'm concerned, and they are equivalent 4.8s, only because there were originally 4.8s, because I just demoted St. Vincent. Sorry, St. Vincent. It's just there are too many other tracks in that album that I just think fall short. But that's down to a 4.75. But now there are 3 4.8s. But they can be ranked. They're ranked very, very, very closely. Even though they have things that are better in some areas and not in others. As far as my ranking goes, 3rd place is Arc Iris. Amazing compositional work. But, drifted toward country, and it was hard to sometimes pin the center. I feel like she found her center and then sometimes abandoned it on the album, but marginally. Number 2, though, is Owen Palette. Number 2 is Owen Palette because Owen Palette is as far as I'm concerned, I rated this on the innovative scale. I think it is easily the most innovative album that we've done because I found myself every step of the way intrigued by what he was doing in terms of this compositional style between strings and electronica. I could go in details, but that's the problem. I think I love this album in a more uniformed state. I like listening to this album just in as a whole. I think there are great moments, but I have this in my bio, which is, even though it's recently edited, we all have our bios edited. Check that out. That's something new for the new year. New bios, because, we update ourselves. People are not stuck in the past. The very last line I have is much like life, music is about the moments. And I think that I need to reach real heights sometimes in the midst of work, and that's what My Brightest Diamond did for me, which is why it places number 1, despite that it's still 4.8s, just like these others in the ratings, in a near penultimate, next to Godsticks, which was somehow managed to be awesome every step of the way. There are very few places on these albums where I'm kind of like, all right, this is a nice section, but it's not blowing my mind every single second, But that's besides the point, because we can't always be perfect. Perfect is almost impossible to achieve. I may find this and demote Godsticks if there's something superior in the near future. Who knows? That's just how we rate. But what it really comes down to, again, is the signature moments that I experienced as I was listening back to My Brightest Diamond's This Is My Hand and trying to figure out what my favorite moments were. And I found myself going through this album, and it was entirely comprised. The list from all our ratings was entirely comprised of this album. From song to song to song to song. All my moments were on this album. Everything else seemed to come secondary, and that's because of her voice. It's because of her vibrato. It's because of the way she phrases that with the instruments that she brings into a certain moment in such a big way. Sometimes it lasts for an instant, sometimes it lasts for the entirety of a bridge, but it's the peaks and valleys of that album that bring me to tears like no other album this year has. Owen Palette is really, really close But as far as I'm concerned, on more an academic standpoint, I appreciate what he's doing, and I think it is furthering music along, perhaps a little bit further than what My Brightest Diamond is currently doing. But I gotta stay true to the tiers at the end of the day, because I think in many ways, My Brightest Diamond is probably Shara Warden herself. Let's just use the name, is probably I think the composer of the year for me.
Well said, everybody. So that's we're coming to the close of our 2014 year in review, but we have some afterthoughts, and then I have some important things to say after that. First of all, some afterthoughts. We'd like to talk about what we wish we'd reviewed. I had mentioned Adam Warrock last year, Schaefer the Dark Lord, who was a guest this year. I mentioned his album last year. This year, I found two really strong hip-hop records, one that I've mentioned on air, one that I haven't. The first one, it's a crime that I really haven't mentioned this year, because it's an incredible record that I personally believe might be better than Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. And that's Perfect Hair by Bus Driver. He's not a nerdcore rapper. As far as I can tell, he's a straight-up rapper. He was featured on MC Frontalot's new record, which will come next, that I wish I reviewed. But it's an incredible journey through hip-hop and composition. His tracks aren't just finely mixed, but they're composed, I feel. So it's definitely worth checking out.
I'm kind of upset that you have not handed that to me, considering what I think of the heist.
Yes. The next track is where I discovered Bus Driver, because he's featured on one of his tracks, and that's Question Bedtime by MC Frontalot. It's just a fun, strong, themed bedtime stories gone awry with MC Frontalot as your host. And it's just well done. They're featured comedians for skits. There are great featured artists on every track. Marion Call was on it, who I interviewed this year. Adam Warrock, who I've mentioned before, was on it as well. It's just a really great record, so you should check that out. The next one is Kings and Queens of the Underground by Billy Idol. Billy Idol had a new record out, and I wanted to do it because I don't think he would have been.
That would have been fun. That would have been fun. But honestly, I think Billy I could have skipped.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't pick it, because ultimately I wanted to do it, but it didn't have the same impact as pulling on some of these others, socially or otherwise. And then the final one is a soundtrack that I neglected to do just because I think it would be an interesting change. Awesome Mix Volume 1 from Guardians of the Galaxy.
But that, you know what, in that case, I would make the argument that it is
it's a compilation. It would have been tougher to rate.
Yeah.
But it had a bunch of great classic songs that would have been fun to listen to and talk about at least. So
that would have been interesting. There's been a couple of other movies and events like that. Like, honestly, I wish they had done a Attack on Titan soundtrack that I can get a hold of, because I love the way that music interacts with that television series. It's phenomenal. And if you're an anime fan and haven't watched Attack on Titan, well, shame on you. A couple of TV shows, a couple of movies have come out. I don't think we really touched upon any soundtracks this year.
It's more genres, I guess, that I'm dismayed that we haven't gotten to this year. But again, we have a whole other year for that. I would like to again continue to be a little bit more diverse. We're still diverse, but there's other stuff out there, and it's very easy to get caught in what is prevalent of the day, such as indie. We had a lot of indie bands. We've had a lot of rock bands, even though sometimes it was a little bit old school. Lots of pop, indie pop still kind of crosses over. Indie just seemed to be the theme of the year. I want to keep going toward contemporary classical. I want to keep going toward jazz. We've still only had one jazz album in 125 episodes. But maybe we have an opportunity to open up that door with the addition of a new writer for the website. It's one Tony Catalano. Shout out, because you can expect articles from him for next year, and perhaps he will have submissions and suggestions, and just try to keep us a little bit more versed in the jazz field, because we do have fallibilities, we have holes. I could always stand to know more in that department.
And I'm kind of upset we didn't do as much electronica. We did so many things with electronica fuse, but aside from Glitch Mob, we really didn't do electronica, techno, trance, house, anything like that. Everything seems to be adopting this, but it's hard to find pure sounds that are any good, which is why I got a kind of a surprise for next year.
Okay. Well, before we get to what's coming up and what we're looking forward to next year, I have a few things. You're going to have a wall of talking from me for a bit. I want to thank people. We've had a huge year on Crash Chords this year. The website has more articles than ever. It had at least in the last year before. We started a second podcast, my interview show, Crash Chords Autographs, which I love doing and has been a blast. We've grown. We're bringing on a new writer. We've all learned new skill sets. The fact that Steve doesn't give me a laundry list of complaints about what's wrong with my writing now, kind of a personal achievement.
Yeah, I know. It's a big improvement.
What a self-shout-out.
Yeah, it's like you're at about a third grade level as opposed to kindergarten now.
At least I am writing.
Meh, 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 meh.
But
this got brutal.
But in all seriousness, I do have an important list of thank yous to read, so bear with me. First, I just want to go to some individual thank yous from companies that have really supported us this year. There's Pavement Entertainment and Sean O'Donnell, who's been sending me tons of contacts. That's how I got in interviews for autographs. It's how I've gotten albums to listen to and write about on the site. Also, Scott Volweiler of Broken Records Magazine, who hooked me up with that contact with Shauna. He's, of course, the reason why we have Finch on our website. We have Powerman on our website. He hooked me up with the interview with Spider. He got me that personal connection. So I'm very thankful for him as well for supporting us and enjoying our stuff, as well as allowing me to write for him and his site. And then finally, from this category of other companies and entertainment, is Invent Records and Yvonne Laughlin, who, of course, introduced me and Steve and all of us to Eric Neff, who was also an interview I did this year.
Two separate companies, right? Yvonne World Entertainment.
Oh yes,
right. I think that's her company, and then Invent Records. I'm not exactly sure how it's connected, but both.
But both are important, and she was a great help this year. She sent us plenty of stuff and continues to, and has been a great supporter of the site since she's discovered us as well. So I want to thank her as well. Next, we go to all of our fans I want to thank, but in particular the 4 fans who gave us recommendations this year. Knockjaw, since that's his preferred form of relatement, who gave us Daryl. Kristen V, who suggested Saliva's Rise Up, which didn't work out the way we wanted to, but I still appreciate the suggestion. D, my former coworker at my day job, who suggested Dumbfounded, who blew all of us away quite a bit. And then, of course, Heather S., who recommended my album of the year, which was In Conflict by Owen Paulette.
Yeah, they were interesting choices. I think it got us out of our shell very well, and thank you for speaking to us. Thank you for coming in and being like, do this. Because it definitely pushed us to try a little bit differently to do these reviews.
And Heather S. especially, because I mean Owen Paulette, considering that out of my favorite album of the year, in which obviously that's how it's connected, is that she found our podcast on My Brightest Diamond and how we reviewed her, and then as a result she sent us Owen Paulette, so it seemed to be very connected. And well, for a first and second album of the year, I mean, and for some of us exactly the opposite, that's a pretty incredible that's connectability between us and our fans. I appreciate that.
I also had a personal highlight this year. As you guys know, I've mentioned it. I got engaged to one of our guests and a wonderful performer and actress, Sarah Biz. We're getting married in 2015 on May 31st, and I'm very excited about that.
Why don't you just give them the address of the place?
We can arrange that.
Come by,
later.
everybody. Drinks are on me.
But now I'm going to go through a long list, so bear with me, of all the guests we've had this year, because this is the first year I've been able to have a guest every month, and then also launched my own podcast interview show where I also had guests. So I want to thank them all individually, in no particular order other than maybe order of appearance. First there's Hops, then Sarah Biz, Sage and Kim of Head Over Fields, who gave us a very interesting look on our review system and our podcast in general. Susan Pike, who was an interesting character to say the least. Louis Logic, who provided great stories. I'm not going to get wordy about this, it'll take forever. Charles Stunningham, Mark Robert Turner of Afterbirth Monkey, Joe Rude returning, The Living Statue Galatea, Molly Heber Wilson of the Wasties, our second Wastie this year besides Sarah, Rashmi, Schaefer the Dark Lord, which was a personal accomplishment for myself. Then we're on to Circadian Clock, which was not the whole band, but Mike, Melissa, and Ari. Thank you for that as well.
Very enjoyable interview.
And then on to my autographs interviews. Thank you to Christy B., Sky Blue, Eric Neff, Ryan McComb of Soil, Michael Kill, Hugo Ferreira of Tantric, Marion Call, Justin Doyle, Cool Z, Jesse Andrew, Try One, Spider One, Mark Young, MC Lars, who's coming in the new year. It's already recorded. I've had the benefit of talking to a lot of artists this year, both on our show and off it, and I am so humbled and thankful that they take the time, they enjoy it, share it, and are a part of it. Our website has grown exponentially as well as all the social media attached. And I couldn't be more proud of us and you guys, because we all drive each other to do better and work harder. And we'll only see more in 2015.
And coming up with the next year, like we said, we're introducing a new writer. Expect to see a lot more content from us on a written level as well. I've already got 4 or 5 ideas I'm working on, and I know these guys are working on their own stuff.
We also have guest book for next year already.
Yep.
The return of Kate is Sincere.
Yep.
The return of Painless Parker as well.
Yep.
And first-timer Robert of the Wasties will be joining us to talk his other band, Rose West, as well as Wasties and solo stuff as well.
Plus, I'm going to have to kidnap Nelson if I need to.
Yeah, we may also be
Lugo will
looking
be
forward
here.
to Devin Mullen of Anxious Kids Make Good People.
And we got a couple of albums we're looking forward to. I'm giddy over a new steam-powered giraffe.
We've got Modest Mouse coming out with a new record, as well as the Decemberists, which we're all excited about as well.
All bands we've either reviewed or talked about on the show at length.
Still my number one in terms of full discography.
And we have, of course, John picking our first album of 2015.
And this is where I'm going to have a little bit from, because the artist that created this album has had essentially a 13-year hiatus in the actual field of electronica that he's working in. He did a couple of compilations, but nothing really as an original piece. It's Zero by Aphex Twin.
Ah.
It's been a very... I didn't even know... I forgot Aphex Twin.
Yeah, they're in my library. Can't remember the last played.
Me too.
There's a couple of like composition and remix stuff that they've done, but Richard James hasn't done an album for 13 years. So electronica's come a long way. So let's see what this actually does, because he used to be touted as one of the biggest electronica dudes out there. Like, he did a lot of great stuff, and I'm kind of hopeful because I've listened to some of it, and it was doing some weird things. So we're starting the new year with some weirdness.
13 years, huh?
Yeah.
Makes me realize how old my library is. And I'm like, I can remember saying, ooh, fresh stuff. Anyway.
We're recording this before New Year's, so on our final note before we sign off, have a happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for listening. You, right now, you listening. Thank you.
Let us know.
We'd probably keep doing it, even if no one was listening, but we're ever always grateful.
I know a couple of people that are listening, so it's about time you caught up to here, Joe. And it's probably...
You're pretty much talking to him in the future right now.
Yeah, I know, no.
Chronological, that guy.
I know he's going through the entire thing, so he's not getting it till this
like
till
in the
March.
teens or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
and thank you. That's, I think, the biggest thing. Thank you for bearing with us for so long. I know we had a very rocky start. We really didn't know what the hell we were doing, but I feel like we kind of hit our stride at this point. And since you're coming back, well, I guess we're doing the right thing so far.
And we're only going to get better.
Hopefully.
Comes down to this. Comment. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. We'll fix it.
Reach out to us on all the social medias. I'm not repeating them. Contact us. Really reach out. We had four great album recs this year. I'd love to have a full 12 next year. Who knows? One for each month.
We're going to have to start another podcast if we're going to do that.
Yeah, at this rate.
Yeah.
But
gonna have
for
50.
the final time in the year of 2014, please remember, audience, music is life.
And life is good.